All right, cool. Let's do it. Welcome everyone to today's webinar on SMS and driving higher engagement and ROI. We are excited to be here today and talk a little bit about our some sales funnel and sales metrics regarding SMS. So uh, briefly, we'll talk about the agenda. So we're just going to have a quick introduction, and then we'll break into the current sales landscape, SMS sales funnel, and the ROI of SMS alongside some best practices, and then we'll open it up to the Q&A at the end. But honestly, Q&A all the time. Anytime you guys have questions, please put them in. The next slide we'll touch on where to do that. But quick, by way of introductions, Maggie, do you want to kick us off and introduce yourself?
Lovely. Yes. Hello, my name is Maggie Misovich, VP of Marketing here at TextUs. And yeah, excited to walk through some of this content with you guys today. This is kind of near and dear to our heart a little bit, just being marketers. So hopefully you get some good nuggets of wisdom, and yeah, looking forward to sharing more.
Awesome. And I'm Michael Foster. I'm a marketing manager here. Yes, this is two marketing folks presenting a sales webinar, but we're very close to the data here. And yeah, so we're looking forward to talking on it. So some quick housekeeping before we kick things off. Like I said, we try to keep this, we would like this to be more conversational than just us reading data and slides at you. So anytime a question pops up, please feel free to just submit your question in the Q&A box below, and we'll be sure to get to it. Before I crank into this, I'm gonna try a quick poll here. Let me see, Maggie, are you able to see the poll? Let's see here.
Negative.
I don't know if it got saved. Okay, all right. Well, basically, I was curious what everybody was using as their main CRM. So if anybody feels like throwing that in the chat of what they're using for their CRM, would be really curious, because throughout today, we'll talk about the importance of using SMS and integrating it with your CRM system. So it definitely is a question that we are curious about and would love to know. So if you guys would like to put that in the chat, that'd be really helpful, I think. But let's kick things off here. So, looking at the overall landscape, I think it's important to start with a question, right? Of what are sellers most concerned with? Awesome. We have some, chat's disabled. Let's see, we can enable chat really quick here.
Q&A is fine. We can throw them in there and just.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You can throw them in the Q&A. Brian and Jen, thanks for letting me know. You guys can just throw it in the Q&A so we can have that information and we can talk on it. Jen said HubSpot, amazing. Chad, HubSpot, awesome. Hey Chad, how's it going, man? Great. Yeah, Odoo. ODOO. I feel like there's always new ones that are popping up. I'm not as familiar with that one, but that's great. Thanks, Brian. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Continue that. Keep that coming. That's great. So, looking at what sellers are most concerned with trends in 2023 and 2024, we see obviously meeting quota, exceeding target during an interesting economic landscape, making the sales process more efficient, which I think resonates probably for everybody on this call, I'd imagine. And then upselling and cross-selling existing customers, because we all know it's easier to upsell and cross-sell existing customers than it is to win net new a lot of the time. And so we wanted to start the presentation a little bit, kind of discussing each one of these and how we think SMS really plays into each one of these. So in terms of generating more pipeline, we really think it comes down to engagement. I think engagement is key in 2024, especially when you start to compare SMS rate, response rates, open rates, reply, when you compare the SMS to email. And so what we see here basically are two percentages on the left-hand side. 48.5% have for conversational one-to-one response rate, and then you have your larger campaign sends through SMS. They sit around a 12%. This is from our data of the past year, by the way. And when you compare that to where we sit with cold email, I always think cold email response rate 5% is way high. I'm curious of people on the call, if you guys are all getting 5% response rates on your cold email, then kudos, you're doing something right, because we definitely are seeing closer to in some instances 1.5 to 2.5%.
That's a generous. That's a generous stat. There's a lot of different ways to find this data based on who pulls it, and so for the purposes of this kind of discussion and analysis, we actually picked the higher one, because even with a 5% response rate, there's still some really interesting comparisons as it relates, to text and SMS compared to email. So it is generous. I think you're right there. But knowing that 5% is probably the upper limit that you would see.
Yeah, for sure. And so looking at that, obviously, I think that starts to paint the picture, right, of how SMS is kind of this direct line into your end user and can increase engagement. But the next part, which is sellers are most concerned with in 2024, is efficiency gains, right, in the sales process from opportunity created to close one business. Trying to be more efficient on each stage in each funnel and really trying to optimize those conversion rates. We're hearing more and more that that's a main issue for sellers, and really speed to lead is what we think is important here when comparing SMS to other like leading other methods like email or call, right? So interesting numbers on this slide. I think email response times 2 hours. Again, generous, Maggie. I think we definitely took the generous numbers here, and SMS response time sitting around 11 minutes. So you're able to see kind of just the immediate impact there, and you probably see where we're going with this a little bit on how SMS can immediately impact ROI from the very first step of the sales funnel. And with that, I think I'll hand it over to Maggie, and we can kind of crank into the pipeline and each stage here.
Yeah, right on. So buyer journey, this is a simplified view of it, but hopefully everyone's familiar with this kind of funnel view as it relates to how a buyer comes into your sales pipeline and how they transition from, just looking for information to being ready to purchase, and then what happens after that purchase. So, I won't read all of these, but, the main stages here being attract, convert, close, and delight. So we've got multiple times throughout this journey where we can engage with what starts as a prospect and hopefully becomes a customer. So we'll talk a little bit stage by stage here. So at this very highest level, just, someone's coming into your sales funnel, they may just be looking for information. So what does that look like? They're maybe just searching on Google, they're visiting the website, they might download a piece of content or interact with something on your website, or maybe you've generated a lead at a conference, for example, or an in-person visit. And so, there's a lot of different ways that, particularly as marketers, we look to kind of engage with prospects at this stage of the funnel. And so we use different types of mediums to deliver content, and I ideally want to engage them further beyond this first step. So here's just an example of how text might look as they play into that. So, I use an example of someone coming to download a piece of content. Maybe they're not necessarily looking to speak to a salesperson just yet, but are interested in something that you've targeted at them. And a good way to then follow up on this with SMS is to say, hey, thanks for downloading that benchmarking report. Are you available, for 5 minutes to discuss? It goes a little bit further beyond just sending that confirmation email and then hoping that they engage with you down the line. This adds this additional touch point, and it's, right in front of that prospect in a more immediate manner.
Yeah. And it's funny when looking at the top of the funnel, I feel like we get the question a lot where it's like, well, what about opt-ins, right? It's like, yes, you should not be just blasting a list of 2,000 people with a text message that you have not any opt-in language, right? So really, I think going one further, especially with like the content piece, is really looking at the content you guys are offering to your end user and figuring out, okay, what forms should we maybe add an SMS checkbox on, right? Like what forms make sense to see if they would want to opt in for text. And I think that goes a long way. And also just understanding how qualified that person is who's downloading your piece of content. Are they extremely top of the funnel, or are they willing to start having a conversation? So
yeah, this is a good area for like that sales marketing alignment too. So I imagine, this is more of a sales webinar. We're probably speaking to more sellers on this call. But it's a good place to kind of, approach your marketing team and say, hey, can we put, an opt-in on that download form that'll then enable you to reach out via different methods besides just email. And so if that doesn't exist currently, in that buyer funnel or in that buyer journey, it's a good conversation starter to say, hey, marketing team, can we do some things on where we collect these leads to better enable us to reach out via SMS down the road?
Yeah, great point. And we have more and more people also joining throughout this. And so to those folks, if you guys we're curious who, or most of the folks that are on the call, what CRM you guys are using. So if you guys want to throw that in the Q&A, because chat is disabled on this webinar, really interested to learn more there as we continue this conversation on ROI. But also as time goes on too, I'd be really curious, like on each stages of the funnel that we're presenting on, if you guys are currently doing anything with SMS that's like working really well. Feel free to throw that into the Q&A. I know it's not chat, and it's more meant for questions, but I am just really genuinely curious on how folks are using SMS at different points of the funnel, or if anybody has already implemented some of these ideas. So.
All right, so moving down funnels, we talked about capturing that lead, and now how are we going to convert and really engage with them. Michael already talked about speed to lead, right? So interesting stat, 82% of consumers expect responses within 10 minutes. Businesses that respond within an hour are 7 times more likely to connect with decision makers. So, speed to lead is not a new concept. We hear it all the time. How can we improve that? How can we be more efficient there? But when you really look at some of the numbers behind it, it becomes very evident that, letting stuff kind of sit up funnel in your pipeline without engaging it in a meaningful and quick way can cause you to lose that business or cause you to lose out to a competitor that's just better at speed to lead. So email and phone, we talked about conversion response times can really hinder that process just based on the fact that they're slow and oftentimes get ignored, or, most of you probably know that it's rare that you're going to pick up the phone and have somebody answer it these days, so the voicemails tend to just float off into space, and who knows if they ever get listened to. That said, text sees upwards of 10 times the response rate of phone or email. We have some really compelling data to illustrate that we've pulled from our own platform and also some external sources. So, I think it goes without saying that, when someone's ready to take action, the more quickly you can engage with and start that conversation, you're more likely to really convert on it down funnel. So response time we talked about. This is just a graph that illustrates what we see with the TextUs platform for response time. So the gray bars are shown in minutes. And this is just over the last year. Phone's ringing. So at its highest point, 16 minutes, right? Middle of the summer, people are probably on vacation doing stuff, but even then, 16 minutes is the median response time we're seeing. The green line is just a moving 3-month average. So it gives you a sense of kind of as things ebb and flow. But I think, it's this very simple depiction of this stat is pretty compelling, right? So when you're waiting for hours on end to get an email response, sometimes days, text is definitely kind of mopping the floor with traditional mediums as it relates to response time. Just another couple of comparison stats, email, looking at 3.5 hours during work hours. If we're outside of work hours, you're more than a business day. So a working day time frame. So, yeah. Closing. So, we've moved the prospect down funnel. Time is money, right? So businesses that are first to respond tend to win a lot more of sales, 35 to 50%. It also, in terms of speeds up the approval process. So you look for communication mediums that generate the best and fastest response. We're a texting company. We're talking about SMS. So that's, there's some like heavy implications there with that statement, but ultimately, it's really about the right mix of channels. You may not be texting your prospects exclusively, but we tend to see some really interesting use cases where, a salesperson may follow up with an email and not get that response right away, and then just shoot a text on the side to say, hey, dropped an email in your inbox with that contract. Let me know if you have any questions. It's just a nice way to kind of support that more traditional methods of communication.
Yeah, Maggie, yeah. I'm glad you brought up the mix too, because I think when you look at the funnel, it's kind of funny to look at the mix percentages, right? Like top of the funnel should be like a mix of your social media, email, heavy, right? Like 80, probably almost like 90%, right? Like 90, 10. And then you have SMS to like some of those like really high value customers or customers that, you know, look like they are ready to make a purchasing decision. And then you switch to, you know, one stage lower and you start to be a little bit more 50-50. And then by the time you get to like this closing stage, you're really at like, I think 80-20, like 80 SMS, 20 other communications, call mostly, and email. But it's funny talking to sellers on this uh, webinar. I'm sure everybody can relate where it's like the end of the month and like every other communication channel probably is going out the window. You are most likely texting if it's the end of the month and a deal hasn't come in yet, and it's like hanging out there. I can guarantee. I know. At least all the sales folks I know will be texting their lead at that point.
Totally. Yep. And, you know, kind of goes into this next point about just providing a quality buying experience. You know, SMS from the use cases that we see allows the opportunity to be more conversational, a little more personalized, right? It's one-to-one in most sales cases, use cases. This stat I like, 71% of prospects make purchases based on their experience with you, right? And you like salespeople are not you know, strangers to building rapport. That's a whole part of the process. And this just aids in being able to do that a little more effectively. You know, customer experience is a major factor in the entire decision-making process. So are you providing a better experience than your competitors by way of how you communicate, how personalized you can, you know, make that communication, the frequency with which you're touching base with that prospect or customer. And lastly, lead response times, you know, give a prospect a first impression of your brand or product. So I think this just, again, helps aid in that, you know, being human, and kind of giving it that more personal touch. A little bit more on this closing stage. So, you know, leveraging tech that improves productivity. We're not to beat a dead horse, but obviously, you know, there's a theme here. 80% of sales require multiple follow-ups for interactions to close. Communication tools that integrate into your existing workflows certainly will help facilitate that and make it a little bit easier to collaborate. And so, you know, that's part of why we asked about, you know, whether or not you're utilizing a CRM or utilizing integrated texting. You don't have to have integrated texting to a CRM, but it certainly helps make, you know, those workflows a little bit easier and more efficient on, you know, as you manage the sales process. And so, you know, ways to do that, like I said, sending a quick follow-up text to say, here's what's coming next, or to say, hey, I dropped that contract in your inbox. Let me know if you have questions. Using it to follow up on those transactional tasks, again, just kind of helps improve, you know, the sales cycle, improve speed to close, and just, you know, hopefully makes your jobs easier as it relates to, you know, hitting those touch points throughout the entire journey. So a couple just little interesting takeaways. We talked a little bit about response time, and response rate is a piece of that as well. So we like this little chart that it illustrates the impact of character count on response rate. So, you know, when we talk about using text as a supplemental conversation or a supplemental communication tool rather than on its own, and part of that is for, as we mentioned, those transactional tasks, just following up on kind of longer communications that may come through email or phone. You know, getting that quick response when messages are under 100 characters, we're seeing upwards, you know, of 70% or higher response rates. The more characters you add into that text, you see just response rate, you know, take a dip alongside of that. So this is really designed to illustrate, you know, there's an importance in getting that response, but don't overdo it. You don't write a novel in that text. Use it to support other mediums that may require longer, you know, more detailed information. But again, if you're looking to get that response to ensure that the deal is still moving forward, text is a great way to do that. Just keep it short, you know, use it as a supplementary medium rather than, you know, trying to send all kinds of information in 500 characters.
Yeah, I wish I had this data for email. Like, this is crazy to me. When you go over 100 characters in text, you drop off like half of the response rate's gone. It's wild to me, and it makes a lot of sense. Like, if I get a text from a number that I don't know, or I know it's a sales text and it's long, I'm most likely deleting it immediately, right? And I'm sure everybody on the call feels the same. So yeah, I think that this is such a powerful just little graph because every text that you guys are crafting should be 100 or less, right? And that's why we offer, there's things that come into the picture like branded shortened links, right? So if you're including a link, that you need to make sure that you're either using TextUs branded shortened link or Bitly or a HubSpot shortened link to ensure that you're not wasting character count on a link, right? So there's like an easy win that you guys can all implement today. And so the I think everybody on the call also knows that when the sale is made, it doesn't end there. We talked a little bit earlier about the importance of upsell and cross sell, and I think activation is really one of the most important parts. And SMS should 100% be utilized for activation. So after the sale is made, I saw a couple folks actually say that they are using HubSpot as their CRM, which is amazing. HubSpot is an extremely powerful tool, and we use it personally as well for workflows, whether it's post demo or within the sales funnel or the sales process or post sale, right? And so, really, I think it's important to sit back and think from a strategy standpoint where you should interject SMS within your sales workflow. But yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting just piece of information here. Slow response times can increase churn by 15%. I mean, that's crazy. I would never have thought that response time would be closely linked to churn, but it makes sense because it all comes back to customer satisfaction. And really, at the end of the day, that's how you should be utilizing SMS to build rapport and to build a relationship. And so, yeah, we think that's extremely important from this you see, I think, much more on like a one-to-one conversational basis, but you can also leverage campaign sends as well. So like all recently closed one, or if you're a salesperson, you can enter them into a specific workflow that sends them a text every month, just checking in. How are things going? What can we help improve? I think that goes a really long way when it comes to renewal and upsell. And so, yeah, we're touching a little bit too on the tech stack integration here. So earlier on, asked about what everybody was using for CRM, and we didn't have a HubSpot logo in here, but obviously that's a huge one as well. Because full transparency, we use HubSpot and Salesforce as well, and TextUs integrates with both, and it's just amazing to be able to hop back and forth and be able to track on the contact record what communication has gone out. But really, no matter who you're using moving forward, obviously there's a ton of different SMS providers, email providers, VoIP as well. You really should, when you start the conversation, talk about tech stack and overall integration, because we really see productivity increase once you're able to see overall communication on, like I said, on a contact record. And really what that looks like, we pulled up a Salesforce picture here, but it's super helpful to be able to use the contact activity history to see what's gone out, what's been responded to, and then easily from within your CRM send a text. So huge, and it's great. A majority of the answers that we got back, it seems like folks are actively thinking about that, which is really good.
All right, let's talk ROI. This whole discussion has really been around driving pipeline and converting pipeline. So it really just starts with higher response rates lead to higher conversion rates, and ultimately, more opportunities to win in your pipeline. So we put together an ROI model. This is based on data that we've collected ourselves, that we've utilized text within certain sales processes. And so I wanted to put together kind of just a view of this to understand what does it really look like if I use versus not use SMS within the sales process. So very basic model. You start with 500 contacts from maybe it's a marketing-led outreach, like downloading a piece of content, or maybe it came from engagement from an email send. With those 500 contacts, this is essentially what it looks like as you move down funnel. And so these are the raw numbers. We'll share some percentages in the next slide, but moving those, NQLs is how we refer to them, marketing qualified leads, into an SQL, which is a sales qualified lead, means that, this prospect is potentially ready to have a conversation with a sales team member, or would like to learn more about, your product. You can see how this progresses down funnel with the standard average utilizing things like phone and email versus SMS. So from those 500 contacts, you're looking at about 150 if you utilize SMS versus 135 without. And then you can see the way this kind of materializes down funnel. Based on the conversion rates we see, the difference in your closed won business is upwards of 50% higher with SMS. So why is that? And it really just comes down to conversion rate. And so we measure conversion rate or engagement rate, if that's how you use the terminology, by response. And so with SMS, seeing a greater response, we are converting 30% of those leads into SQLs versus 27% without SMS. Doesn't seem like a crazy high number, but those incremental improvements in conversion rate down funnel, even a few percentage points, can really sway, what you end up with in terms of close one business at the end of the day. So, we'll share this deck out, so you don't need to write down all these percentages, but I think it's really compelling when you look at, side by side, these numbers don't look like they're that much higher, but when you do this at scale, and you're reaching out in mass, you can see where the close one numbers really start to make an impact at the bottom of the funnel. 12 deals, okay, not bad. But compared to 18, that's a 50% higher amount of closed won deals. So we've been utilizing SMS throughout our sales process as leads come in different ways, engaging them throughout that funnel to inevitably move them into a sales qualified lead, so that we can further nurture them into hopefully a customer at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, just such impactful numbers. This is huge. I think that this is our first stab at kind of trying to really calculate the ROI of SMS, because I'm sure everybody can understand it's a hard thing to do. But as we continue to integrate it into our sales process, we're continuing to see really good data. So that's very exciting. And that kind of leads us to the next part of this little chat, which is just about improving engagement. And so Maggie and I both kind of honed in on three main takeaways that we've seen in the past year at how sellers are really starting to utilize SMS and increase engagement and conversion. And so obviously, first one here is the speed to lead part, right? As soon as a lead is coming into your funnel, in the SQL stage, I should say, we think it's extremely important to connect with them on a one-to-one basis and start to build that relationship. Of course, that being said, you do need to make sure that they're properly opted in, so you guys don't get so it's not like a spammy message, and that you start the relationship off on the right foot. It's never good to start a relationship with a spammy text. Chad wrote in and said that he calls the long text the angry X text. Which is very funny. Yes, you don't want to start a conversation how you wouldn't want to start just any friendly human interaction, right? So that's one. The second one that we see is a lot of companies are starting to leverage rich media in really cool ways. Maggie, I'm curious if you want to talk about some of the QR code stuff that you've seen. But just to highlight, some folks are just sending pictures, with a promo code or something like that. But this QR code example is really cool, I thought.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways. Well, QR codes are a great way to get opt-in in. I mean, it can be virtual, but we see it a lot with on-site. So if, particularly conferences, or if you're a brick and mortar establishment, scanning that QR code with, someone can scan it with their phone, and then it'll pre-populate a text to your number, and then it'll send it off with, whether it's a keyword or some sort of opt-in language. So we've been seeing some really great success with that. Honestly, you can use a just free online QR code generator website, type in the phone number, type in the text message you want it to pre-populate, and then, start slapping that on your marketing and sales materials. The other thing with rich media, so, once you kind of have that opt-in and you're starting to engage in conversation, especially as you're maybe looking to re-warm up some cold leads, maybe you want to send a one-to-many campaign type message. We do see a bit more engagement with utilizing, PDFs or images. Typically, images tend to perform a little bit better than text related documents, but it does just kind of give that your message a little bit more, it stands out a little bit more, right? So certainly would encourage you to experiment with utilizing, rich media within your outreach, especially if it's more of that upper funnel, trying to just get folks to engage and reply on that first send.
Yeah, I love it. We use it, yeah, the conference, the Yeti giveaway, which is amazing because we end up getting all these great contacts to be able to continue the conversation, whether it's in a campaign or a one-to-one, right? And so that's the next part, which is really understanding when to move the conversation from a campaign SMS strategy to more of a one-to-one strategy. And so what we're seeing sellers do is really like maybe hone in on a small group, whether it's based on industry, company size, and employee count, pieces of content that they've downloaded, whatever you deem necessary to enter them into this like funnel. More or less send out the conversation or the campaign message, and then filter down into one-to-one to carry those conversations on. So just knowing when to do it, we think is extremely important. And so those are three big ones.
One of the things I'll add to with point number 3, so if you're going to send kind of a mass text, a one-to-many campaign send, when you get replies on that, you should engage immediately in a one-to-one conversational message, because that's, you're capturing that prospect, that customer at their highest point of intent. And especially if they're engaging with, your larger sends, then it gives you an opportunity to then take that message, kind of out of its campaign nature and have more of a conversation and keep that engagement going, striking while the iron is hot, so to speak. And we see some really nice results and higher engagement, better response rate, all of that that comes out of that tactic with a lot of folks that use this in a sales capacity.
Yeah, 100%. And that it also just, Maggie, hearing you talk about it, brought up just the overall CRM conversation, as well as like everybody should have a field on the contact record, I think, that says opted into text, right? So when you're looking at that contact, whether they responded to an email, downloaded a piece of content, whatever it is, you're able to tell right away if they've opted into text, because then from a speed to lead standpoint, you're like, okay, let me bypass these other forms of communication, go straight to SMS. So just a little tip, I think it's really helpful and easy to add, a contact field that would be checked once they opt in. So that's another little tip, I think. And awesome, Maggie, we did that in 30 minutes. That was we got through a fair amount of data in 30 minutes.
We tried not to like overload you with charts and data, but certainly, I want to use this time to answer any questions. So feel free to throw them in the Q&A. While we do that, I actually was thinking maybe it'd be cool to talk through how we utilize SMS within our inbound process and kind of what that looks like. I think it's also helpful for other sellers and marketers to understand, like, how does this apply to me? Show me some concrete examples. So I feel like it'd be a cool time to just kind of talk through like how TextUs uses TextUs. Well,
I love it. Let's start, Maggie. We'd start with the demo request if you want.
Yeah. So this is a good way to kind of illustrate the sales marketing alignment. So for us, and we're B2B, obviously. Someone lands on the website, they learn a little bit about our product. They want to see a demo, and that's ultimately what takes this prospect from an MQL to an SQL. So they'll go on, they'll fill out a form. On that form, we'll collect a phone number, and that checkbox that opts people in to receive SMS. And as part of that demo flow process, they'll be able to schedule on a calendar right away with an account executive if they know when they want to meet. And then because we use HubSpot, it'll trigger a workflow within HubSpot where there'll be a series of communications that happens to confirm the meeting, and then peppered some text follow-ups in as part of that. So this is an example where, yes, they're getting emails as part of that calendar scheduling and just saying, hey, thanks, we'll be in touch. And then there's a time delay that happens within a HubSpot workflow where then a text message will go out from that assigned salesperson's phone number. So there's some interesting kind of ways to automate, especially within that CRM integration. Now, that said, like if you don't have HubSpot, it's okay. You can still utilize SMS as part of that process to nurture that lead. It's just a little bit more manual, and you know, whether that's assigning yourself a task to then follow up, or you know, it's something that's just part of your typical sales process. Like it can be done just as easily. It's just not as automated. So from there, moves into the sales pipeline. Say they have a great conversation, a good demo. At that point, now, you know, the seller is nurturing that lead, either following up with both email, phone call, and text. And so there's a few different ways that happens once it's handed off. And we talked about Salesforce a little bit. We do utilize Salesforce within our tech stack. And so at the point that it's handed off to the seller, it kind of moves from that automated text flow in HubSpot into more of a one-to-one conversational text flow within the Salesforce environment. So that seller can then engage with you know, send them meeting reminders. A lot of the examples we talked about throughout this presentation with just quick follow-ups on your typical, you know, contract flow or answering questions that might come up is another super easy way. So we have a couple different approaches that we take to utilize it throughout the process. But as you know, as illustrated in that ROI model, you know, the engagement we just see is much higher. The conversion rates are, you know, incrementally better all the way from top to bottom of funnel. And so, you know, certainly encourage you guys to like get creative with how you would implement it. The way we do it is not necessarily gospel, but we've iterated on it a lot. We've tested a lot of different ways to, you know, leverage the tool and get a sense of what drives the best engagement. And honestly, we're still learning that. You know, I think the communication preferences that we see with prospects, it changes all the time. It's, you know, people tend to be more receptive to text, at least, you know, in recent years from companies. I think there was probably a time when SMS was a bit of a newer medium for businesses, where like you'd get a text from a, you know, a company and be kind of like, ugh, but it's become more embraced than not. And I think someone mentioned like, you know, email is dead, and we would agree. We definitely don't get quite near the engagement with email, even though it's still kind of this thing that won't leave us alone. We still leverage it from time to time, but find that, you know, supplementing is with SMS really helps drive conversion and really helps improve, you know, the flow pipeline, sales pipeline. So
Yeah,
yeah.
100%, 100%. There's and there's some great questions rolled in too when we were covering our process. And quick one really is, can TextUs integrate with Salesforce? And yes, yeah, we integrate with Salesforce and utilize that integration in-house, which is really helpful. And I'm actually going to throw in the chat here just a link with all of our product integrations if anybody else is kind of curious. But yeah,
I'm going to resend it because you only sent it to me.
oh, okay,
Maggie,
here you go.
No, just kidding. That's the wrong one. My copy paste is old. Let's try this. There we go. We've got it together, guys. Don't worry.
Boom, look at that. Yeah, so if anybody wants to check out that link, that's just goes over all the integrations. TextUs is like a first mover within business SMS, right? And one of the biggest pros of that is that we started building out these integrations a long time ago, which is, you know, really, really helpful, I think. And yeah, to go off Maggie's point there, when we're trying to track down like an opportunity in-house, we're able to see, you know, obviously they came in through a demo, they were enrolled in this workflow where they were sent automated text by the rep to book on calendar, to follow up. And then that rep continue that conversation through text one-to-one. Every single piece of that communication comes through in the activity record in Salesforce on the contact record. So like for me, when I'm like doing research end of month, trying to figure out where ops are and how overall marketing campaigns have performed, sometimes I'll just go in and have all that rich data right on the contact opportunity account record, where you're able to see every piece of, you know, every text that was sent, every text that was replied to, every email, same thing. So that's to answer a question in a semi long-winded way. Yes, we do integrate with Salesforce. And then we had another really good question too, about creative ways to optimize the opt-in, which that's a fun thing to say. Yeah, that's a really, really good question, because as 10DLC becomes more and more important within the overall national carrier landscape, right? Which 10DLC, if anybody does not know, is more or less like a registration, to ensure that you are complying, and not sending spam text, more or less. And so opt-ins are becoming increasingly important. Maggie, I'll touch on this one first, and then I'm curious if you have input here. But I really do think the best way to do it is on forms. I think the best way, because if you're creating content, Texas creates a ton of content, right? And I think that we are currently moving to a place where we're going to have opt-in language on every form, because then that person is agreeing that they want the content, and they're also agreeing that in the future you are able to reach out by SMS. And so it
Yep.
kind of just covers your base there a little bit. And that's one way that I've really seen it work.
Yeah, not unlike email opt-in, right? You can do it in a number of ways on a form, but would certainly encourage, leaving that mobile phone number on your content forms. And I think we've played with the language a little bit, where rather than just putting phone number, we've put mobile phone number like as the descriptor. We've put textable phone number so that it's like very clear that we're not looking for a landline or a business line. I know that's a bit of a dying art, but it doesn't necessarily help us to collect phone numbers that we can't text. So we've changed the language up a little bit there. Something that certainly would encourage you to test out to get a sense of whether or not you get that field filled in more. You can always make the field required. That's a bit of it's touchy subject. Sometimes people don't like having to populate their phone number in there. So, you can try requiring it as part of a submission. The QR code, which we've talked about, but we're seeing a lot of great success there. So, again, anytime you have an opportunity to utilize a QR code, rather than sending them to a website, send them to a text. So, again, I use like qrgenerator.com. I mean, there's a bunch of free ones online where instead of sending people to a URL, you'll scan that QR code and it'll open up their SMS app, and within their phone with a pre-populated keyword or text message to your phone number. And then as soon as that text message is sent, then they'll get the immediate auto reply with any sort of opt-in, opt-out language, so you can manage them that way. We're seeing that gaining a lot more momentum, and we use it quite a bit in a lot of different ways, particularly at conferences and shows. But you can use it in presentations. You can use it on sales one pagers, things like that. Really, anywhere you can slap a QR code, that's a great place to give it a go. And the adoption has been pretty good. So
Yeah. Yeah. And the last thing I'll touch on, because I know we're coming up to time a little bit here, but if you guys are using SMS, like an SMS service, every single piece, like your email footer or your signature should say text me, and with a phone number, like in bold, right? Because when somebody texts you, they're opting in, more or less, and they're getting that information immediately with, hey, opt in or opt out. So if they want to opt out, that's on them to opt out after they send the text. But in general, creative places, I think, to put your number and text me, your social media profile, LinkedIn, and email signature, like I said. So just think about more creative ways, I think, and then you'll start to see more opt-ins, I think.
for sure. Yeah, I think anywhere you would put an email address, anywhere you would put a website URL, it's an appropriate place to either add or swap out for that phone number. So that said, certainly we're always discovering new ways. So get creative too. There's a lot of stuff to try and figure out what works. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And with that, honestly, my email is michael@texas.com, Maggie@texas.com. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send any questions or thoughts over, honestly. And we'll be following up this webinar to everyone who registered with the recording as well the deck. If you guys do want to just look at some of the numbers on the ROI model a little bit closer. But yeah, appreciate everyone's time. Maggie, thank you for your time as always. And yeah, we will be in touch and follow up here shortly.
Thank you all.
Awesome. See y'all. Have a great day.